in your name, your organization, and also the country that you are working in. And we've been talking about supply chain professionalization, and we've been particularly focusing on what is a professional. The next part of what we are looking to show you, and I'm sorry, but I've just lost the slides for a moment, is to be thinking about what it is that makes a supply chain management professional. And you can probably see already where we're heading with this. And that is, a supply chain professional is someone who adheres to these ethical standards, who has special knowledge and skills, that's educational training in the area of supply chain management, and who are prepared to apply this knowledge in their particular work environment. So a question that you might ask is, what education and experience defines a supply chain management professional? And you may be interested to know that for supply chain management profession, there is no global standard for supply chain management professionals. This differs in different contexts. And different supply chain management professional associations actually define education and experience to reach certain designations within their framework. And in some contexts, some professional councils in some countries define some health professional cadres or some supply chain cadres, for example, in procurement and also in clearance officers. But we'll come back to that. What I'd like to do is to take you on a journey to give you a quick summary of a number of the supply chain organizations that work globally. I won't read out everything on the slide. I'll give you the opportunity to have a read, but I'll highlight a couple of key points. So a lot of you who are involved in the supply chain space will know that the Association of Supply Chain Managers recently renamed from APICS about a year ago. And ASCM are really strongly involved from the US, but have 300 channel partners working in 100 countries. And these particular professional association has a range of certifications that you can achieve by doing their training and completing their particular exams. A number of you will also be aware that this professional association was recently awarded a Gates grant and are working in the health supply chain development space. But this is ASCM. Another one is SAPICS, and we're pleased to acknowledge on the call Jenny, the Executive Director of SAPICS. Welcome, Jenny. And this is the South African Production and Inventory Control Society. Now, they are one of the channel partners for ASCM, and I should have explained a channel partner has been given authorization by ASCM in order to deliver some of their training and their certifications. So a channel partner acts on behalf of ASCM. SAPICS, more than 700 members across 14 countries. They're based in South Africa, but they're working across Africa for 50 plus years. Their people in their overall community database is around from 44 countries. So really a professional association focusing in the Africa context with training. And they're currently looking at a professionalization process that looks at a practitioner designation going from entry level up to expert. CILT, this is a mainly UK-based Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, 33,000 members, 30 countries, been going for 100 years, so one of the longest serving professional associations. And they're focused on the movement of goods and people, and so the logistics and transport aspect. They have a number of regulated qualifications under UK education framework, and particularly focus in different areas of logistics and transport, as you can see there. For example, bus and coach, aviation, rail, freight forwarding, maritime. So a lot of you have heard about SIPs. SIPs is a further professional association, the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply. They set a global standard in procurement and supply management, and they are an awarding organisation that's often recognised by regulatory authorities, particularly in the area of procurement. Again, one of the larger groups, 200,000 members, 150 countries, I say mainly based in the UK, but they are quite global, having offices in a range of areas now. They also have channel partners that can provide certificates on their behalf, and those are listed on the screen. And if you are a CIPS certified purchasing and supply professional, then you'll have one of those particular certifications that are on the screen. So you can see it's actually quite a wide grouping of the more larger organisations. There are also quite a range of regional organisations, and within this presentation today, I did not have the opportunity to list all of them for you, but in West Africa, the Association of Logisticians from Benin is worthy of a particular mention. They've been improving in their activity, particularly in the health supply chain space, and working across West Africa to strive to improve the professional approach for supply chain in a number of areas. They're based in Benin and been going for approximately 10 years. Now, a couple of associations that you may be very familiar with, IAPHL, and a number of you may have received invitations through the IAPHL listserv. Established in 2007, housed within JSI, it is a free membership. They don't offer any particular credentials, but really focus as a place to network with more than 7,000 members from more than 140 countries, exchange ideas and improve skills. And this is a great place to join if you want to really interact into the health supply chain community specifically, either in the development sector or in the health sector. And just a couple more to share with you. One of those is the Humanitarian Logistics Association. In this context, we would describe humanitarian as being where there is a international disaster or a security environment that requires, a rapid deployment of materials or medicines for populations in need following a disaster. And they focus on those particular activities that are noted there on the screen. Excuse me just for a moment. My apologies. So that's quite a range of professional associations, and there are a lot others if you have a look on the internet, but they are probably about the top 8 or so to be aware of. And what's interesting is that they sometimes compete against each other as professional associations, but they also often work together and in different activities as well. But the important point to note is that there is no global professionalization and no global standard. So the next thing to consider is what's the role of universities? Well, around the world there are various supply chain courses from certificate all the way up to PhD from a range of universities. Again, there are no standard curriculums for supply chain management, and when you have a look at the curriculums that are available, they vary in focus. What's particularly interest is middle to high income countries will have their schools of business as the place where logistics and supply chain live. But historically, because health supply chain has been in the health area of lower middle income countries, you will find health supply chain management activity in that area. Our project, as with others, are trying to encourage the cross-pollination of university schools between health and business, because we feel there is a lot to gain from working together. So these universities can be public or private in what they offer. And a quick look on the internet can give you a range of those, not only in the US, but also across Europe and Asia and in and Middle East as well. It's quite a range of...
Yes, it's good.
Okay. Sorry, Michael, you had a comment?
No.
Okay. So the other point to note is Empower School of Health is at this stage the only university to offer an online health supply chain diploma. We're also aware that there are a range of initiatives from universities for MicroMasters. ASU, Arizona State University, is one example. MIT is another example. And it's a very diverse landscape when it comes to education in the supply chain space. So at this point, I'm going to give just a little summary of some of the key points and invite you to type a couple of comments in the chat. So what I've been speaking about is qualifications and certification. So supply chain management qualifications can be attained academically through university pathways, or they can also be obtained professionally through professional associations, and we've seen a couple of those today. There's no better way, either academic or professional, as long as it's a competency-based approach where particular competencies in supply chain management are well articulated. The next term I want to get you to think about is one called designations. In a profession, you will have a designation of a professional which may be separate to the qualification that they pursue. A good example is a pharmacist. If a pharmacist graduates from university, they are a pharmacist, but they need to do a further board exam before they're registered as a registered pharmacist, and a registered pharmacist is a designation. In the same way, a procurement professional may have a procurement qualification, but until they register with the Procurement Council, where that council exists, they will not have the designation of that procurement title. So it's just a note between qualification, certification, and designation. The other aspect to be clear about is registration. So professionals with specific designations will register with a professional body. Now, the particular ones in different countries, custom clearance agents are often registered, procurement professionals and pharmacists as examples of where registration occurs. It's interesting to note that very few countries actually regulate supply chain management professionals, apart from custom clearance agents and pharmacists. And in some countries, pharmacists are required by law to be involved in supply chains, but this is not all countries, and I'll come back to this in a moment. And then professional associations often fill the role of setting practice standards for professionals where registration or regulation do not exist. So, for example, you may have a country that does not have a registering body or a governing council for supply chain professionals, but in that country, a professional association would still operate, such as SAPICS, SIPS, A SCM, where professionals can get their certifications. And that still becomes valid in that environment and often pursued by employers. So that's just a particular summary point. And at this stage, I just want to come back to our participants to see if there is any questions or points of clarification that anyone would like at this time. Please take the opportunity to type in the chat. As we have a number of participants, we won't use audio today. So if you do have any points of clarification, please type that in the chat at this time. While you're thinking about that, I want to come to the next point, and I'll be interested to hear from you in the chat and ask you, who is a health supply chain professional? Or in other words, what difference is there between a health supply chain professional and a supply chain management professional? And I would invite you to place your opinion in the chat for others to read, because this is a very interesting topic. It's a topic that when it comes up on IAPHL, there is a range of discussions and strong opinions. And as you type in the chat, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things as we discuss this together. So following through our logic, a health supply chain management professional is someone who adheres to the ethical standards and has special knowledge and skills in the area of health supply chain management. And these people are prepared to apply this knowledge and to have a profession out of it. Again, question, what education and experience defines a health supply chain management professional? And the answer is there is no global standard for health supply chain management professionals. It varies by country and it varies by environment. And in many countries, there's no difference between supply chain management professionals that look after medicines and supply chain management professionals that look after other commodities. And that shocks some people because medicines are particularly important for the health of people. But it's interesting that when you look at the competencies required to move medicines and other products around, the overall competencies are very similar, probably about 90%, which is the same across all commodity groups. The particular points with medicines is around their storage, around their particular value, and the importance for that last mile distribution for patients. And so with that in mind, a number of countries require by law that pharmacists look after supply chain management for medicines. So this is interesting to note because, and so it varies by country. And what's interesting is in high income countries, which often have greater money to invest in regulatory systems and professional systems, there is less need for and less request for pharmacists to be involved in the supply chain per se, but more focus of those pharmacists in the delivery of health services. If you haven't seen, this is a great report if you're talking to your colleagues about the role of pharmacists in supply chain. In 2018, the International Pharmaceutical Federation produced this technical report. I'll declare I was one of the primary authors of the report. And this is looking at the role of pharmacists as medicines experts in assisting with the quality and availability of medicines in the supply chain. It's a report that presents a lot of interesting information and then a series of 7 case studies of different countries around the world that show you the different systems that I was alluding to. And for more detail, I would encourage you to have a look at that particular report. But a couple of points I'd like to emphasize here. One of those is that pharmacists must ensure that they have the relevant supply chain management competencies to engage in supply chain management roles, and that these competencies are not often present in regular education for pharmacists. Yes, the pharmacists come out with an understanding of medicines and can work with those medicines in their practice environment of a hospital or a community pharmacy. But usually in pharmacy degrees, pharmacists don't come out with logistics and supply chain competencies. Now, pharmacists have a role to play as part of a team in supply chain management, which may involve other logistics and supply chain management professionals. As medicines experts, pharmacists can give advice and to particularly assist with quality and do advice with use and substitution of products. And in this particular report, there's a range of case studies which are described the different roles of pharmacists. And it's interesting that roles are context specific, and the overall the overall element, the aim of supply chain is to focus on the availability of quality medicines in a particular country context. What's interesting, for example, is a number of African country contexts. There's less than 1 in 10,000 pharmacists, and so there's not so many pharmacists either. And so some of the questions are about where they should be placed. But this report really helps us to think about that. Before we hand back to Michael, this sometimes is a controversial topic or a topic that people have particular opinions on. So I want to stop for a moment and ask people if you have any particular comments you want to put into the chat, then about supply chain professionals with health products or health supply chain management professionals. I would invite you to do that now. and there's some great, thank you Sanjay and Keith for your comments and your particular definition. So far in our story today, we've talked about who is a professional, who is a supply chain professional, and then we've just looked particularly at the concept of a health supply chain management professional. And what we then want to do now is hand back to Michael, who's going to help us think about considering health supply chain management career pathways. And Michael, I'd like to hand the call back to you. Michael, just know.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So let's not forget, what are we trying to achieve here? The long-term outcome for a workforce, the supply chain workforce. What we want to achieve is we want their performance to be optimized. And next slide, please. If we want their performance to be optimized, then that's the only way they can contribute to the health outcome of the country where they work. So, next slide, please. Looking at the people that deliver human resources theory of change, there are 4 pathways that leads to the optimization of the workforce, the supply chain workforce performance. And these are staffing, skills, working condition, and motivation. Just to remind us that this professionalization topic we're currently discussing fall within staffing and motivation. There are 2 other pathways that must advance for the workforce performance to be optimized, and those are skills and working condition. Next slide, please. So let's get some facts here. Fact number 1 is that for the health supply chain, the pressure will continue to increase. Going into the future, we can see that clearly from this slide. That in charge, according to WHO, in 2010, the new vaccines that were introduced into that country increased by 24 folds. And that led to 5-fold increase in the workload for the supply chain professional or people that work within the supply chain. And this is talking about vaccines. So cast your mind to medicines that are taken on a daily basis, the anti-diabetics, the hypertensives, the HIV medicines. That will continue to increase. The pressure will increase. Let's look at fact number 2. Next slide. Let's understand also that supply chain management staff are not recognized or under-recognized. And this is because of the following. That the professional councils are lacking, the job description not there. And most times it's ad hoc, put together job description. Continuing education, professional development is not there. To distinct career path, it simply are not just there. And what this has done is to put supply chain task upon the pharmacist, the physician, and the nurse, taking them out from their clinical role. Next slide. Fact number 3 is that without a career path, the expectation and the mandate for the supply chain to improve health outcome will just be lacking, will not be there. And this is because opportunities for growth is not just there. Next slide. So what is career development, therefore? We have put together that the career development is a lifelong pursuit of personal goals in a chosen field, in this case, the supply management field. So employees' career growth will happen if they are the following. If there is a ladder for them to climb, a visible ladder for them to pursue, for the ladders to have some criteria that they must fulfill as they move from one low level of the ladder to a higher level of the ladder. And as they strive to move up the ladder, there's some form of performance evaluation built into the system that either rewards, corrects, or even promotes these professionals. And also, there should be an academic or professional institution, that provides a learning opportunity for these professionals. So they be able to build their competencies and fit into that ladder that is created for them. So let's understand that employees are constantly looking for career development and job satisfaction. And if they don't get that, especially the younger ones, they might abandon the ship. Next slide. At this point, type in any question and comments that you have. Over to you, Andrew.
So thank you, Michael. I think you very clearly sort of outlined what a lot of people on the call are experiencing as they look into countries or involved in the supply chain workplace for health commodities themselves. This is lack of recognition, people leaving the industry, and this sort of lack of career paths. In my experience in GHSC-PSM, there are a number of countries who are looking at this particular issue and wondering what to do. So we're just going to go to the chat just to see if anyone has any particular comments that they would like to note. Again, if you've just joined us, welcome. We would invite you to type in your name, your organisation and what country you work in as a way of us having a record and your colleagues seeing who is with us today. And now that we've seen this particular need, what I want to do is to present to you some work we've been doing in our project around putting forward a professionalization framework. We need to, in order to address some of the issues that Michael noted, we need to think about systems recognition of current and future HR gaps. Now, this particular slide in the circles are a summary of a range of the elements that Michael referred to. The need for regulatory institutions, academic institutions, career ladders, professional associations, career professionalism, and career pathways. And this all comes together for us to understand that we need a system for recognizing this to move forward. So what does that look like? So we need this broad roadmap to make recognition happen. A number of you who've been to my webinars previously or read some of the material from our project will know we talk about the supply chain labour market in countries. So if you think of people as themselves a commodity that moves around the marketplace of supply chain, we have both supply and demand. And I would just like to ask if you could just check that your microphones are muted. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you. And in a particular marketplace, there is both supply and demand. Supply is the production of professionals through academic or professional association means, and the demand is who are the people that are being employed. Our private sector and government's actually asking for the right people. Earlier this year, we did a case study in Rwanda where we looked at the national level at the systems actors, these regulatory bodies, education institutions, and professional associations. And then we also looked at the functional actors, private sector, the government employee environments for supply chain workers, and other supply chain organizations of the government and private sector. And what we found is there was a very large deficit in mid-level supply chain cadres, and this real increased need to increase coordination around what makes a supply chain professional so that both employers in private and public sector could actually ask for the right people with the right qualifications, and the academic institutions and professional associations could actually produce the professionals to meet that market. And so we saw that there was an opportunity for catalyzing the marketplace. So that means an opportunity to try and improve the availability of health professionals by looking at this aspect. So with the help of SAPICS and under the People That Deliver Initiative umbrella, we undertook a activity where we interviewed a range of stakeholders and focus group around this question, where we hypothesized that a supply chain management professionalization framework that contained an agreed competency framework and that had suggested career designations could be used by governments to actually define the professional standards of the profession, used by employees to articulate employers to articulate the competency requirements and career pathways in their organization, and used by institutions of learning to define clear learning and teaching courses, and then by employees themselves to map out a professional career in supply chain management. So we completed the research and we came up with 4 particular points of action that we're going to move forward with following this work. What we found is that in order to stimulate the marketplace of health professionals in supply chain, we first of all needed to define both the breadth of competencies or skills and knowledge, and also that sort of Dreyfus maturity about going from a novice to an expert, and what that means in different areas of supply chain for health commodities. And so there's this need to define this competency framework that makes sense for both the private and public sector. The next is we found that organizations were asking for an explanation of role designations and examples of job descriptions that would help them to understand what their organizations should be looking for. So this repository of supply chain management roles, designations, and job descriptions could be built from the competency framework so that the particular breadth of competency areas was covered, but also the depth or maturity over a career could be covered as well. But then to match that demand, it was also clear that we need to build this education, training, and credentialing framework that helps to coordinate learning institutions' development of appropriate training courses that match the role descriptions and designations. So you can see that the combination of a core competency framework with a repository of supply chain roles, designations, and job descriptions built from that framework, and a range of supply chain courses that also match those roles and the competency framework would create the tools needed for a country to really grow their supply chain professional environment. Now, the fourth component was the people we interviewed were saying very clearly that there needed to be a clear country implementation methodology with a change management approach, acknowledging that every country has a different environment within which such an approach could be positioned, and that this needed careful consideration. And so people that deliver with the GHSC-PSM and USAID with SAPICS will be working together to build these elements over between now and the end of this year, and also looking to trial this approach early 2020 with hopefully to show some good results of being able to stimulate a country's health supply chain professional environment to have more professional workers available for organizations, created by institutions, and have more satisfied supply chain professionals as they would have a career to engage with across both the public and the private sector. So the purpose of today was to present this concept to you as a way that we feel we can be moving this discussion and this agenda of professionalization forward. So again, it's an opportunity for a question before we move to a summary. Hitesh from the Interagency Supply Chain Group, welcome. Government investment in workforce supply chain and the like is extremely political. The framework is useful. Can we talk about how to invest alongside this? Absolutely, Hitesh, and I would welcome a side discussion to see the ISG's thinking on this, because what we're talking about is systems change. We had the opportunity to share this model at the People That Deliver board meeting last week, where the government of Nigeria was present, and they too saw that such a framework from a umbrella body like People That Deliver would be a fantastic way of helping to start a conversation to lead to systems change. So thank you, Hitesh. Luxon had a question: of the 4 performance consideration mentioned in the PTD slide by Michael, is there a place for professional management supervision as a way to improving performance? The answer, Luxon, is absolutely, and it is in the motivation pathway. I would invite you to go to the People That Deliver website, and Michael, you may be able to cut and paste the link into the chat for our colleagues, where you can go and have a look in more detail at the People That Deliver theory of change. Any further questions before we move on? Thank you for those questions, and I'd invite you to continue to type those in as we move forward. So, as we come to the conclusion of this webinar, I want to remind you of what we tried to talk about today. So firstly, we wanted to challenge you to think about what makes a professional, or who is a professional. And we were reminded that a professional is, or a profession is a group of professionals that are ethical, that have a particular skill set, and they are able to enact that skill set for the benefit of their profession, but also the community. We discussed that supply chain professionals do this in the context of supply chain with a whole range of commodities. I took the opportunity to share with you a range of the professional associations around the world, their role, to mention the role of academia in this space, and to remind you that some of the key definitions of the components here. Then with health supply chain management, we clearly were saying that there are certainly a role for pharmacists, but just because you're a pharmacist, and both Michael and I are pharmacists, it doesn't make you a supply chain professional, that you need to have the right competencies, and we encourage you to look at some of the different models as presented by the International Pharmaceutical Federation. Then Michael presented to us about the career pathways and about the 4 facts. The fact that there's increasing workload, the fact that in a number of environments there aren't the support structures necessary to encourage people to stay in their career as health professions, and there's real need to provide a structure or an environment that links together both health professionals, professional associations, credentialing bodies, and academia to create an environment to improve the professionalization of those working with supply chains. And then in the final slides, we were presenting this particular professionalization framework that we have just finished research on, where we'll be working with SAPICS to move this forward. And we will be looking to get feedback from colleagues through IAPHL as we build these concepts together. So with that, I'm going to come back to the questions, and people are typing in there. So Sanjay, the report is on the website, and so for FIP, but the slide deck has an active link for that, and we will have that for you. So let's just go back up a little bit. Philippe, strong rivalry between pharmacists and supply chain professionals trained in the commercial sector, health sector, or without professional qualifications in the field need to create a spirit of collaboration through a national professional association. So thank you, Philippe. And this is exactly what the International Pharmaceutical Federation report speaks to. And that is a partnership between supply chain professionals and health professionals. In order to have a partnership, You need to clearly understand what are the range of issues that are affecting those relationships. And in a number of countries in low and middle income environments, the only jobs available to pharmacists are supply chain. They are not clinical jobs. And so you need to be mindful of that context. You need to be, professional associations for pharmacists need to be mindful that if pharmacists are to be involved in the space, they need to have the right credentials in order to do the job well. And so we are not saying that pharmacists are not appropriate to have in supply chain. We're saying that they should be part of a team, and we're saying that there should be these discussions in the local environment to see how to get the best use out of the professionals of the year, and to make sure that whoever is working in the health supply chain sector, they have the competencies they need. Jenny, thank you. You've spoken straight to the point, and that is by having professional designations, these a supply chain designation can be obtained by anyone who has the right qualifications. It could be a pharmacist. It could be a supply chain person. It could be an engineer. It could be. So the concept around professional designations is you set the criteria that's competency-based in order that people have not only the correct competence to do the job, but demonstrated skills, and they are awarded a title or a designation that shows they've reached a certain standard. And so thank you, Jenny, for noting that. Alexis, thank you for putting that link in. Thank you for your assistance. So, Michael, we've had a summary. We've covered a few things today. As the co-presenter on today's call, what would be two key messages that you would like to emphasize for our participants today?
Thank you, Andrew. What to emphasize, it's the direction that we are all going. We want to achieve a situation where the supply chain workforce, its performance is optimized. And professionalization speaks to staffing and motivation. But staffing and motivation can't do it alone. It has to go in the same pace, same investment, the same attention with working condition and skills, according to the people that deliver human resources theory of change, so as to get where we want to go. So that is the key message I want to leave with everyone. Professionalization is the way to go, and it's contributing, but we still have other factors that we need to move forward alongside.
Thank you. So now that we understand from Michael that to have ultimate productivity in the workplace, we not only need professionalization, we need those other elements, those 4 elements mentioned in the theory of change. The particular take-home message that I want to have you think about is that professionalization of supply chain competence will not just happen. There needs to be, from our experience, systems change in a country context in order for stakeholders that want to improve the availability of skilled professionals to work in supply chain and health supply chains particularly, to come together and to talk about what is relevant in their context and consider the competencies, to consider the supply environment, the education, and the both at academic and professional association-wise that meets local needs, and from a demand perspective to equip organisations in public and private sector with the thinking necessary so that they are aware of what makes a supply chain professional and to ask for the right people. And we recognise that that needs some significant change, and we are hoping that through our partnership with people that deliver SAPICS and USAID, we will be able to develop and trial this supply chain management professionalization framework that we hope will act as a catalyst to be able to improve the professionalism in supply chain for not only those on these calls, but the people we serve in the different organizations and countries where we work. And with that, I want to thank you very much for participating today, and I would invite you to type in any final questions or comments you'd like to make in the chat. We will be sending around a link to recording and also some of the resources that are associated with this presentation. So, Michael, thank you for your contribution today. I would also like to thank our GHSC-PSM KMC team for their assistance, and wish you a very productive rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.